How do you learn to trust again when fear has been your only teacher? That was the silent question surrounding Debbie the moment rescuers found her trembling beneath a parked car. When she arrived at Red Creek Wildlife Center, the medical team saw a critical case of starvation and trauma. Facing a life-altering injury and a deep-seated fear of humans, Debbie's road to recovery seemed almost impossible. But her caretaker, Thomas, saw a fighter. And when he stepped into the quarantine room, something extraordinary was about to happen. What did Thomas do to help this terrified bobcat trust again? Join us to see how one simple action sparked a transformation no one expected. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The mid-morning sun hung high and bright over the quiet township of Oak Haven, casting long, sharp shadows across the manicured lawns of Cedar Street. It was a picture-perfect Tuesday in late autumn, the kind of day that promised crisp air and the crunch of leaves underfoot. However, beneath the chassis of a dusty silver sedan parked in the driveway of the Miller residence, the world was neither bright nor crisp. It was a dark, terrifying tunnel of metal and asphalt, smelling of oil and old rubber. Here, in the deepest shadow near the rear axle, lay a creature that had forgotten the feeling of safety. Debbie, as she would later be named by the hearts she stole, was a bobcat. But looking at her in that moment, one would be hard-pressed to identify the majestic predator native to the American wilderness. She was a ghost of a cat, frozen in a rictus of terror. Her golden brown coat, usually thick and lustrous to ward off the chill, was dull, patchy, and ravaged by the relentless itch of mange. She was painfully thin, her ribs visible even through the matted fur, and her hind legs lay beneath her at an awkward angle, useless and heavy. She did not move. The world had taught her a cruel lesson over the last few months. Movement attracted attention, and attention brought pain. So she practiced the art of invisibility. She slowed her breathing until her chest barely rose. She widened her amber eyes, staring into the middle distance, dissociation her only shield against the approaching footsteps of the humans. Thomas, a veteran wildlife rehabilitator with 30 years of experience etched into the lines around his eyes, stepped out of his transport van. He adjusted his gloves, his movements deliberate and calm. He had received the call an hour ago, a homeowner reporting a big, sick cat under their car. Thomas knew better than to expect a domestic stray. The description of the ears, tufted and black-tipped, had told him everything he needed to know. "She's right under the back tire, Tom," Mr. Miller whispered, standing a safe distance away on the porch, wringing his hands. "She hasn't moved an inch since I came out for the paper." "All right," Thomas said, his voice a low, rumbling baritone designed to soothe. "Everyone stay back. I need quiet." Thomas knelt on the pavement, lowering his center of gravity. He didn't stare directly at the animal. Direct eye contact was a challenge in the animal kingdom, a declaration of war. Instead, he looked slightly to the side, allowing his peripheral vision to assess the situation. What he saw broke his heart, though his face remained a mask of professional detachment. The bobcat was young, perhaps barely out of her first year. She should have been prowling the scrubland, hunting rabbits and squirrels, full of vinegar and vitality. Instead, she was a statue of misery. As Thomas shifted his weight, a dry leaf crunched beneath his boot. The reaction was instantaneous. The bobcat didn't run. She couldn't. Instead, she let out a hiss that sounded like escaping steam, her ears flattening against her skull. She swiped a front paw at the air, a desperate, fearful gesture. It was a bluff. She had no strength behind it. "I know," Thomas murmured softly, inching the catch-pole forward, not to snare her, but to guide her. "I know you're scared. I know it hurts. But we can't stay here, little one." The rescue was a slow, agonizing dance of patience. Every time Thomas moved, the bobcat flinched, her eyes wide with a panic that spoke of deep-seated trauma. It wasn't just the injury. It was a profound distrust. In her world, weakness meant death, and she was entirely exposed. When Thomas finally managed to slide the net behind her and gently encourage her forward, he noticed the way her back legs dragged. She pulled herself using only her front paws, gritting her teeth against the agony. She didn't fight when he finally lifted her into the secure transport crate. She simply collapsed, her energy spent, resigning herself to whatever fate these tall, hairless apes had in store for her. To her, the darkness of the crate wasn't a comfort. It was just a different kind of trap. The drive to the Red Creek Wildlife Center was smooth. The radio turned off to keep the environment silent for the passenger in the back. Upon arrival, the atmosphere shifted from the quiet tension of the rescue to the clinical precision of the veterinary team. Dr. Sarah Evans was waiting. She was a woman of few words but immense skill, having reconstructed the wings of eagles and the shattered legs of deer. She and Thomas moved the crate into the examination room, the heavy steel door clicking shut, sealing out the noise of the outside world. "Let's see what we're dealing with," Sarah said, pulling on fresh nitrile gloves. They had to sedate her. There was no other way. Even in her weakened state, a bobcat was a wild animal, and pain could make her dangerous. As the sedative took hold, the tension finally left the bobcat's body. She went limp, her head resting on the stainless steel table. For the first time, Thomas could truly look at her. He ran a hand gently over her flank, avoiding the raw, crusty patches of skin where the mange mites had burrowed. "She's starving, Sarah. Look at this." "I see it," Sarah replied, her voice tight. She was already working the ultrasound probe over the cat's abdomen and checking the spine. "Severe sarcoptic mange. Dehydration is critical, but it's the hips and spine I'm worried about." The X-rays appeared on the digital monitor a few moments later, glowing in grayscale. Thomas and Sarah stood in silence, analyzing the ghostly images of bone and marrow. "There," Sarah pointed to the lumbar region. "Trauma. Likely a car strike, maybe weeks ago. It didn't sever the cord, thank God, but the swelling and bruising are immense. There's nerve damage. That's why she's dragging those legs." Thomas looked from the screen back to the sleeping cat. "Prognosis? For survival? Fair, if we can get the infection under control and get some weight on her," Sarah said, crossing her arms. "For release? That's the million-dollar question, Tom. If she can't hunt, she can't go back. And right now, she can't even stand." "She's a fighter," Thomas said, stroking the soft fur between the bobcat's ears, the only spot untouched by mange. "She survived this long with broken legs and no food. She didn't give up under that car. We owe her a chance." They named her Debbie. It was a soft name, a human name, given in the hopes that it would bring a softness to her hard, painful life. But in those first few weeks, Debbie was anything but soft. She was angry. As the sedative wore off and she woke up in the quarantine run, a warm, quiet enclosure with soft bedding and heated floors, she did not feel gratitude. She felt trapped. The pain in her legs was duller now, masked by medication, and the terrible itching of her skin had subsided slightly thanks to the treatments. But the fear remained. When Thomas entered the room the next morning to change her water and offer food, Debbie dragged herself into the corner, hissing violently. She struck out at the wire mesh, her claws clicking against the metal. "Good morning to you too," Thomas said, keeping his voice level. He didn't flinch. He knew that this aggression was born of vulnerability. She was broken, and she knew it. The only defense she had left was to look scary. She refused to eat while he was in the room. She would watch him with those calculating amber eyes, tracking his every movement. Was he going to hurt her? Was he going to poke her? It was only after he left, watching from the hidden camera in the hallway, that Thomas saw her drag herself toward the bowl of specialized carnivore diet. She ate voraciously, gulping down the food, her survival instinct overriding her pride. The days turned into weeks. The routine was monotonous but necessary. Medications to kill the mites, anti-inflammatories for her spine, physical therapy sessions that required Thomas and a vet tech to gently manipulate her back legs, stimulating the nerves and keeping the muscles from atrophying. These sessions were a battle. Debbie had to be lightly sedated or restrained for the early ones, her growls vibrating through the thick towels they used to handle her. She hated being touched. To her, touch had always meant pain. The collision with the car had been a touch. The fighting with other animals for territory had been a touch. The cold ground had been a touch. Why should the hands of these humans be any different? Thomas, however, was stubborn. He believed in the plasticity of the brain and the resilience of the spirit. He knew that healing wasn't just about knitting bones and killing parasites. It was about the mind. "You're going to walk again, Debbie," he whispered to her during one of their sessions, his hands gently cycling her back legs in a running motion. "And you're going to trust me. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but we'll get there." Debbie just stared at him, her pupils dilated slits, her body tense. But she didn't bite. It was a start. The turning point didn't come with a lightning bolt or a dramatic event. It came in the quiet, dusty silence of a Tuesday afternoon, almost 2 months after her rescue. Debbie's appearance had transformed. The mange was retreating, revealing the stunning, tawny coat with its distinctive black spots. Her face, once gaunt and skeletal, had filled out. Her eyes were brighter, clearer. Most importantly, she was beginning to move. She could stand for short periods, her back legs trembling but holding her weight. She could hobble from her bed to her food bowl without dragging herself. Thomas sat on a small stool inside her enclosure. He had been doing this for a week, just sitting. No medical bag, no catch pole, no agenda. Just sitting and reading a paperback novel aloud, letting the cadence of his voice wash over her. Debbie lay on her elevated platform, chin on her paws, watching him. She was no longer hiding in the corner. She was observing. She had realized that this man, with his white hair and soft voice, was the source of the food. He was the source of the warmth. He was the one who adjusted her bedding when it got soiled. Thomas finished a chapter and closed the book. He looked at Debbie. She didn't look away. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Thomas extended his hand. He didn't reach for her face or her paws. He just laid his hand flat on the platform, palm up, about a foot away from her nose. It was an offering, a question. "I am here. I will not hurt you. The choice is yours." Debbie's nose twitched. She could smell the soap on his skin, the scent of the pine forest on his clothes, and underneath it all, the scent of a living creature that meant no harm. She shifted. Her back legs adjusted, Stronger now. She stretched her neck forward. Thomas held his breath. A bite now would be serious. But he didn't pull back. He trusted his instinct, and he trusted her. Debbie sniffed his fingers. Then, she did something that nearly made Thomas weep. She rubbed her cheek against his knuckles. It was a quick, shy movement, marking him with her scent. And then, the sound came. It started deep in her chest, a rhythmic vibration that seemed too large for her body. Thrum, thrum, thrum. A low, hesitant rumble. A bobcat purr. It wasn't the domestic purr of a house cat. It was wilder, guttural, and profound. It was the sound of a wall coming down. It was the sound of fear, finally, after months of terror, relinquishing its grip. "There you are," Thomas whispered, a tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. "There you are, girl." The vibration filled the small room with hope. It meant she was beginning to feel safe. It meant she understood, finally, that the hands that held her were there to heal, not to harm. From that day on, the trajectory of Debbie's recovery shifted. It wasn't just physical anymore, it was emotional. The aggression melted away, replaced by a cautious curiosity. When Thomas entered the enclosure, she would greet him with a soft chuff, a sound bobcats use for friendly recognition. Physical therapy became a cooperative effort. Instead of restraining her, Thomas would use food lures to get her to walk up ramps and step over small obstacles. They built a jungle gym of logs and platforms at varying heights to encourage her to use those back legs. "Come on, Deb, you can do it," Thomas would encourage, holding a piece of raw quail at the top of a slanted log. Debbie would eye the prize, her tail twitching. She would plant her back feet, the muscles bunching under her new, thick fur. With a grunt of effort, she would push off. It wasn't the graceful, explosive leap of a wild hunter. Her hips were still stiff, her gait slightly rolling, but she made it. She scrambled up the log, grabbed the quail, and looked down at Thomas with a look of pure triumph. She was adapting. She was proving that limitation does not mean the end of joy. She learned to pivot her weight to compensate for the stiffness in her spine. She learned to climb using her immense upper body strength, hauling herself up where her legs couldn't push her. However, as winter melted into spring, a difficult conversation had to be had. Dr. Evans and Thomas stood outside Debbie's enclosure, watching her sunbathe on her high platform. She looked magnificent. A healthy, heavy bobcat with a coat like burnished gold. But when she jumped down to chase a butterfly, her landing was heavy, her back legs buckling slightly before she recovered. "She can't hunt live prey effectively, Tom," Sarah said gently. "Not in the wild. If she misses a strike, she doesn't have the speed to recover. Or if she encounters a coyote or another bobcat, she can't fight and she can't run fast enough to escape." Thomas nodded, watching Debbie. He had known this day was coming. "So she's non-releasable." "Legally and ethically, yes," Sarah confirmed. "We can't put her back out there to starve or be killed. She needs permanent placement." Usually, this was a somber verdict. The goal of rehabilitation was always release. To keep a wild animal in captivity was a compromise. But as Thomas looked at Debbie, and as Debbie looked back at him, blinking slowly in the sunlight, he didn't feel sadness. "She's not stressed here, Sarah," Thomas observed. "She's not pacing. She's engaging. She trusts us." "She trusts you," Sarah corrected with a smile. "She tolerates the rest of us, but she loves you." They decided to move her to the sanctuary wing of the facility. It was a massive open-air enclosure, acres of fenced forest with natural streams, rocky outcrops, and dense vegetation. It was as close to the wild as she could get while still being safe and fed. The transition was the final test. Would the open space terrify her? Would she regress? On the day of the move, Thomas opened the crate in the center of the new sanctuary. He stepped back and waited. Debbie emerged slowly. She sniffed the air, the smell of wet earth, pine needles, and freedom. She took a step, her paws sinking into the real soil. She looked at the trees stretching up to the sky, not blocked by a roof. She began to explore. She didn't bolt in panic. She moved with a calculated grace, investigating every rock and bush. She found a hollow log and marked it. She found a patch of sunlight and rolled in it, exposing her white belly to the sky, completely at ease. Thomas stood by the gate, watching her. He thought she might ignore him now that she had this paradise. He thought the bond they had formed in the small clinic room might have been a temporary bridge, necessary for survival but discarded when no longer needed. He turned to leave, his hand on the latch. A soft sound stopped him. Murph. He turned back. Debbie had followed him. She was sitting a few feet away, watching him. She wasn't asking for food. She wasn't asking for help. She was simply acknowledging him. She walked up to the mesh fence where his hand rested. She pressed her side against the wire, right against his palm, and he felt the vibration again. The purr. It was a thank you. It was a promise. Life in the sanctuary settled into a beautiful rhythm. Debbie became the queen of her domain. She wasn't the terrifying, aggressive creature from under the car, nor was she a domestic pet. She was something in between, an ambassador of resilience. She spent her days napping on high rocks, watching the birds she could no longer catch but still enjoyed tracking. She patrolled her territory with a distinct rolling gait that became her trademark. She was stronger than she had ever been, her shoulders rippling with muscle that compensated for her weaker hips. But her favorite time was the late afternoon. This was when Thomas would make his rounds. He would come to the fence, sometimes with food, sometimes just to talk. Debbie, the bobcat who once shrank from every movement, began leaning subtly into the routine. She would hear his truck from a mile away, her ears swiveling like radar dishes. By the time he walked up the path, she would be waiting at the fence. One particularly golden evening in late summer, a year after she had been found, Thomas brought a guest. It was Mrs. Higgins, the elderly woman who had made the initial call, though it had been her neighbor, Mr. Miller's car. Mrs. Higgins had called every month to check on the poor kitty. Thomas helped Mrs. Higgins with her walker down the gravel path. "Now, stay quiet and move slowly," he instructed. They approached the enclosure. Debbie was up on her favorite perch, a large granite boulder warmed by the sun. She spotted the stranger immediately. Her ears went back slightly. Old habits died hard. "Is that her?" Mrs. Higgins whispered, clutching her chest. "Oh my, she's beautiful. I remember seeing just a ball of dirty fur and teeth." "That's her," Thomas said proudly. "Debbie, it's okay, friend." At the sound of Thomas's voice, Debbie's ears perked up. She stood, stretched her long back, and hopped down from the rock. She approached the fence, limping slightly, but with her head held high. She stopped right in front of them. She looked at Mrs. Higgins, studying her frail form, the walker, the trembling hands. Animals often sense vulnerability. Debbie knew what it was to be frail. She knew what it was to struggle to move. Slowly, Debbie sat down. She blinked her eyes, a slow, deliberate blink of trust. Mrs. Higgins brought a hand to her mouth. She looks happy. She is, Thomas said. She has a good life here. She has her dignity. Debbie let out a soft chuff and rubbed her cheek against the wire, right near where Mrs. Higgins was standing. The old woman smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "I felt so guilty," Mrs. Higgins confessed softly. "Knowing she was out there, suffering. I thought she was too far gone. I thought maybe it would have been kinder to let her go." "Healing is messy," Thomas said, looking at the bobcat. "And it's scary. When fear is the only teacher you've had, trust seems like a trap. But she was brave enough to try. She just needed someone to show her that hands could be gentle." Mrs. Higgins nodded. "If she can do it. If she can come back from that." "Exactly," Thomas said. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and burnt orange, the temperature began to drop. It was time for the humans to leave, and for the bobcat to begin her evening patrol. Thomas reached his fingers through the mesh one last time. Debbie pushed her wet nose against them, a final connection for the day. The aggression that had once defined her was a distant memory, washed away by months of patience and kindness. She turned and walked back into the deepening shadows of her forest, her movement fluid despite the injury. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew Thomas would be there tomorrow. She knew she was safe. Debbie was no longer the terrified bobcat beneath a car, freezing in the face of a hostile world. She was the survivor who had learned that while the world could be cruel, it could also be kind. She was the teacher now, showing everyone who visited the sanctuary that broken things can be mended, that scars are just maps of where you have been, not where you are going. She found her spot of choice for the night, a bed of soft pine needles beneath a sprawling oak tree. She curled up, tucking her nose under her tail. The wind rustled the leaves above her, a sound that once might have made her jump. Now it was a lullaby. Debbie closed her eyes and slept, a deep, dreamless sleep of the safe and the loved. In the end, it wasn't the medicine or the surgery that saved her. It was the moment she decided to take a risk on a gentle touch. And for the rehabbers and the visitors like Mrs. Higgins and everyone who heard her story, the lesson was clear. If a wild, wounded creature can learn to trust again, what is possible for the rest of us? Kindness, it turned out, was the strongest medicine of all. And in the quiet sanctuary of the Red Creek Wildlife Center, under the watchful gaze of the moon, a bobcat named Debbie was living proof that it is never too late to heal.